Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm here, Katherine Peterson, along with my co host, Michael Regan. And Michael recently went to an event, and it was kind of a two-part event. And we covered the first part in a prior episode. It's the Modern Mortgage Summit. But the second part of that, which I think is fascinating, is the Mortgage Real Estate Summit. And this was directed more towards real estate agents, and we want to break that down for you today. I was not at the event, so this is new information for me. So, with that, I will welcome in my co host, Michael. Thanks for being
Yeah,
here.
happy to be here with you, Catherine. Yeah, the Modern Real Estate Summit was definitely part two of the day. So for those of you that maybe didn't listen to the prior episode, a great one to go back and check out because we highlighted a couple of my favorite takeaways from that particular event, which came from a couple of speakers that I had not personally heard from before. I'm sure they're well known out there in the world that we work in, but they just happen to be, folks I hadn't heard from before. Where the other, 8 or 10 speakers I had a chance to hear from before. All great. I've got great notes on all of it, and I highly recommend that those of you out there that are interested go back and pay to listen to this. I think for $100 you get access to the entire day. It's recorded at Modern Mortgage IQ. That's where you can find all of this. So whether you're on, social or want to find the website, you can get that data. But this Modern Real Estate Summit was the afternoon portion of the event. It was a little bit shorter than the morning, but very power packed. And we heard from 5 really high level real estate professionals. And Catherine, that's my first takeaway is, Dave Savage, Todd Bookspan, to your credit, you guys really did a great job of bringing a room together where both sides of the audience in the housing industry were heard from. And really, I think that made the audience interesting because whether it was lenders that invited their real estate partners or realtors that invited their lender partners, everybody was going to get something out of this event. So at a high level, just, great shout out credit to Dave and Todd for hosting. I think this was their 5th year, Catherine, that they've hosted
Mm,
this event, and in the post COVID world, this was their 3rd year with a live audience. So I was really privileged to be in that room.
yeah, I bet it was a dynamic group. Well, good. Well, talk to us about the first speaker and some of your takeaways from them.
Yeah, so I think the afternoon kicked off with a gal named Lacey Newman. She was based out of Nashville, and she also works on the American Dream television series. So if any of you guys watch that programming, she's one of the hosts that's on there. But her group in Nashville is pretty dynamic, and she was willing to, share some of her personal story of basically how her production went from not a heck of a lot to hockey sticking to the right, as they like to say. Just a really great run. And she detailed some of the things in her personal life that led to that motivation. But what really was interesting was not just that she has recently been putting up really big numbers, and those of you who have the tools can go out and look up Lacey and find out. But it was really around her ability to evaluate where to spend her time. That was the part that was impressive to me, was just recognizing that you really have to be able to evaluate where your time gets spent so that you can really understand how to elevate the quality of that time. And so she really spent a lot of time just digging deep into her team and her routines to be able to level up. And so what was interesting to me is she reminded us that last year, 2024, that 74% of all registered real estate licensed real estate agents didn't close a transaction. There was no
Yeah.
escrow last year for 74% of them, and only 2% of the realtors last year closed between 11 and 20. So, when you really look at the numbers like that, for those of you listening out there, if you're thinking, well, first of all, if you're on the lender side and you're thinking, gosh, it feels like I've had to find a lot more realtor partners than I used to in the past to get things done, the data backs that up. Like folks that are even just doing 2 or 3 deals used to feel like part-timers. Now you need lots of those people to really even be able to hit the number of transactions that you might be shooting for. And if you're a real estate professional and you're thinking, hey, I'm feeling down on my game, I just want to encourage you. Lacey's story was pretty inspirational, and it was all really around aligning herself between her current life and the life she was envisioning. So it very much matched up with some of the vision exercises that we do. It was really a great story. So right out of the gate, Lacey led us off and was great. And then that led into another speaker, a guy out of San Diego by the name of Kyle Whistle. Kind of like the whistle you blow, I think is pretty so, but no T in there. It was a WHISSEL. My gosh, this guy was power packed. Their team really plays at a high level. Again, you can go look up the data to see this, but he had a really clear roadmap. And for as a coach, Catherine, I can tell you, I love a good roadmap because when you're able, our friend Todd Bookspan was really good about doing this with his Win by Noon. It was basically, here's my playbook, here's how I do it. Well, Kyle, I'm sorry, laid out his roadmap, and it's built on the EOS model. Have you and I talked about EOS on a previous podcast?
No, I don't think so.
EOS is it's a system. It was originated by a real estate group, I think, out of Ohio back 30, 40 years ago, but it stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Mm.
And so it's a tool that many entrepreneur people use. They don't have to be in real estate. It's a system and a model. And Kyle really showed how he lays that out really clearly in his business, and it creates a ton of structure. So for those of you who feel like, gosh, I feel like what's missing in my business model right now is structure, he really laid out the simplicity of his model. So again, I'm going to encourage you, go out there and listen to it, because his takeaway statement was standards without enforcement are just suggestions. And so he was really strong on the idea that they top grade. They clear out people on their team that aren't performing. They give them really clear deadlines. You're going to close this many deals by this date, or you can't work here. And they're really strong on it. And when you hear him talk, your first thought might be, gosh, that's pretty hard line. Like, you sure you don't want to, be thoughtful about somebody who maybe just needed a little help? They pour a ton into their team. There's no lack of help. There's no lack of system. There's no lack of structure. It's all up to you to perform. So I found that to be really compelling, because a lot of people right now struggle with the differences. I think we talked about this from the mortgage side. They struggle with the differences between reasons and results. And sometimes
Yeah.
those reasons are rolled up with a lot of excuses. Kyle eliminates a lot of those. So right out of the gate, those were two great ones. I'll pause for a second. Any thoughts on those two, or any questions?
Yeah, so two things. I think evaluating where we're using our time. So right now people have some extra time. So I think it when we get busy, we might go, "Oh wait, how did I do that? What did I?" So I think we can get lazy in that time. So it's probably a good time to reevaluate and maybe do the time tracking tool, some things like that. So thanks for bringing that subject up. Um, we might need to dive into that tool on a future episode. But second, I love how Kyle is so process oriented, it sounds like, and setting standards, but also maybe really being thorough on the operations piece of things as well, to make sure that everybody kind of fits into the right seats. Because I think um, if you are not organized in your business, it's very difficult to grow. So I think that that's a great point that you brought out from Kyle. So thanks for bringing that up as well.
Yeah, that he was really strong on resisting that comfort zone trap that we can all fall into, and
Yeah.
and so I found his message invigorating. So if that's if you're catching that, I'm hoping our audience is as well. Next up on the docket was a gal out of the Phoenix market, a gal named Shannon Gillette. I've heard Shannon before. I'm familiar with her here. I currently am in the Phoenix market, so I'm familiar with what she does. This gal is the classic mom real estate agent who's just massive. Like she's just figured out how to master Instagram as a tool for all of her real estate business, but she isn't all about real estate on Instagram. In fact, she made it really clear that her formula is really built around four really simple elements. And so she's going to, first of all, post every day on her routines somewhere throughout the day, whether it's her morning routine, whether it's a routine at work. She's going to share one of her routines so people can see how intentional she is around those routines. She's going to focus somewhere on a post around her workday, something in real estate specific. So it could be a team meeting, it could be a partner meeting, it could be an open house, it could be a tour with a client. Whatever she's doing, she's going to post on that as a second. The third is they do a ton of client events. and she loves
Mhm.
to post on client events. So even if she's not doing an event every day, there's probably a backlog of a lot of content that she's collected from those. So she's regularly reinforcing that community that she's building through those client events. So she's posting those, and then finally, she's willing to post personal things, her life outside of work. Her husband, her kids, their dogs. So Shannon Gillette, you can go find her. She's definitely visible out there on the social media platforms and specifically Instagram. But again, my takeaway from Shannon was she she really lowered the bar of complexity and said, I just keep it really simple. So it's a lot of high volume, simple strategy. So for those of you listening who sometimes get caught in the complexity, you maybe
Mhm.
aren't doing it because you're trying to do too much. Go follow her feed, and I think what you'll see there is that they are doing a ton of business right now because they are just flooding Instagram with great content. She rotates it through those four filters, and she's super consistent with it and has a great following. So
That's
that's
awesome.
Shannon. Um,
Great.
that one then flowed into Craig Sewing, who I think most of us in the housing industry know because, Craig runs American Dream Television. He's the founder. Before that, he was doing the Real Estate Radio Network. So he really is a promoter of folks that are generally in the space you and I play in. So whether they're real estate agents or whether they're mortgage lenders, his tools are designed to create seamless promotion of their brand. And so it's all
Mhm.
video based now. All of it looks very high end. If you've watched any of those American Dream television
Mhm.
programs, they're like really high gloss infomercials, but they allow us to feature a local agent or a local lender, and they have some boundaries on that. But Craig didn't spend any time promoting what he did or promoting his brand. He really spent time talking about why he loves marketing, and so he really dug into his story, and it was a great reminder to me that all of us do have a story. Some of us may not think our story is that interesting, but Craig made it really clear that once you are willing to share that story, you give the audience an opportunity to engage with that story. And I think he really is driven by a passion to tell stories, and he just wants to create tools that make it easy for lenders and for realtors to share their stories.
Mhm.
And so, he's of course going to keep his routines really simple as well. He doesn't spread himself too thin on things so that he can execute. So that seemed to be a common theme here. And so I would put him into the same categories that it was Shannon, kind of a keep it simple. Don't create things that are really hard to manage. Create things that you can do consistently and keep building your brand. So again, I'll take a pause. Any thoughts or questions on those two?
I think those are good two to group together because of just the simplicity. I think all the time we overcomplicate it, and I do this all the time of it has to be perfect or it has to be right or I have to post a certain amount per day. And just breaking it up into categories can be helpful and also tell your story because, I think about I was thinking the other day, there's a few people online who, aren't polished, aren't amazing, like they just aren't put together 100%. And honestly, those are the people I really connect with because they're more real. And it's
Mm,
like, yeah, but you get so used to seeing them, you feel like you know them so well. And there's a few people that I'm like, it would be weird if I met them because I would feel like I already know them. And I think that's kind of the goal. And how do we get that across? So thanks for bringing that up again. It's a good reminder for our listeners.
one of the things I'll pivot from listening to Craig on this one was he also made a reference to our friend Todd Bookspan because of course Todd's brand is Win by Noon, but he's such a big believer in his morning routine, and he said in order for me professionally to win by noon, I have to win personally by 7 a.m. And I
Hmm.
thought that's such a great way to phrase that because it's exactly what we teach with our morning routine, but he just put a phrase on it. So it was, hey, if I want to win by
Hmm.
noon, I've got to win by 7. And some of you may need to think about that in the simplicity of the routines you're creating is, what is my morning routine and at what time am I demarking that transition so that I can really push myself every day to win in order to keep winning. I just thought that was great. All right,
Yeah.
last and not even close to least was Ken De Leon. Now, this guy's out of Silicon Valley. I think I told you he's a couple of times been the number one, real estate agent, team, of course,
Hmm.
in the country. I mean, this guy is a powerhouse producer. So any of you can look him up and see um, all about his production. But again, another example, didn't spend a lot of time uh, talking about how great he and his team are, spent a lot of time telling his personal story. And the title of his talk was, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Sexy People? And I've got to tell you that that was a perfect title for Ken. Ken was without a doubt one of the most interesting presenters I've ever heard. Um, he really delved into a story of his personal adversity and his near death experiences, not once, twice, or three times, but four different times. And
Oof.
I won't share his stories because I don't think I can do them justice. And it's probably not good um, for our podcast for me to just replay a story that you can go hear from Ken. But here's what I will tell you is if you've ever found yourself feeling like um, what the cards that I've been dealt, I can't win with this hand. If you've ever felt like everything I try just seems to fail and I can't figure it out. If you ever feel like I used to win, but something changed and I just can't get back there. If these are
Mhm.
thoughts that ever go through your head, and look, let's don't make light of, people who feel some sense of depression when they're going through those things. Ken's story is the one you want to hear because when you hear about his ability to fight back from death four different times and what he had to go through to avoid giving up, I think you will. I think you'll not only be inspired, but I think you'll realize that maybe like one of our recent guests on the Building Bigger Lives podcast, coming to a published episode near you soon. Our friend Chad Jackson once said, you can always do more. You just don't know it. You can do
Mhm.
more. And Ken's story was all about that. And Catherine, he has this quirky presentation style where he kind of wiggles and dances while he's talking, and you're tempted at first to think, is this Tourette's or is he having a seizure or what's going on? Is he okay? But he's having so much fun as he's talking and twitching and doing all these funky things and referencing his dance moves. By the way, he's very clear on the fact that he's doing it. This isn't, subliminal. He's it's part of his talk. I think I met a guy who is, when you've maybe been close to death and you've come through the other side, you get really comfortable just being yourself. And I don't
Mhm.
think this guy spends any time worrying about what anyone else thinks of him. He's just happy to be alive and happy to be himself.
Mm.
And success seems to just follow him in truckloads. So he was the closer. He was fantastic. Major credit to Todd and Dave for getting this guy on the stage. Well worth the price of listening to these just to hear Ken's story.
Yeah, wow. So I'm going to ask a little bit different question
Yeah.
because you're in a room with a bunch of people who are in the mortgage and real estate industry. Kind of, what do you feel like the vibe was? Was it uplifting? Was it positive? Was it depressing? Kind of give me the vibe just so I kind of have an idea what how people are feeling right now.
So let's put this in context because depending on when someone is listening to this,
Mm-hmm.
market conditions ebb, market conditions flow, ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So I can't promise you that at the moment you're listening to this, you're going to say this is a fair reflection. But on that day that we sat in that room, in early March of 2025, it was not only optimism, but there was a sense of confidence with that optimism. You know the difference because sometimes people will talk with optimism, but you're like, I think you're just trying to talk yourself into it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you really believe this.
Yeah.
Um, no, these were presenters both in the morning and in the afternoon who brought a sense of confidence, but they didn't let that confidence tip over into arrogance. There was
Mm.
nobody was talking down to you. Nobody was spending a lot of energy bragging on themselves. In fact, there were a lot of folks that, frankly, were incredibly humble. And yet you and I would look at it and
Mhm.
say, if you're humble, oh my gosh, I mean, you've got the data that deserves to maybe brag on yourself a little. And
Mhm.
I didn't hear a lot of that. But optimism, Catherine, that's what I heard. And I think if I were to rewind the tape, I'd go all the way back to, last year when I touched on the highlights from the Housing Wire gathering here in Arizona, which was last April. You can go back, by the way, if you're a listener, and find that episode, and maybe benchmark it. Go back and find out what did I say the temperature of the room was then. I think that was the tipping point, and I have felt strongly that we are about to shift into some really positive territory in the housing industry. I want to be careful when I say that, because I think everyone's well aware that our economic environment might not feel great for everyone as we go through the shift that we're currently experiencing, but it will create some benefits for those who have been waiting for some potentially lower rates. And if that's you and you are in a position where you can take advantage of that, this will be a season where you can finally take action. And so I think if you're a realtor or a lender, this is your go time. Don't wait another minute. And if you've held on this long, please don't quit now. The better days are coming. It's time to help a lot of people in 2025.
Great. Well, good. Any other takeaways from the event before we close this one out?
Yeah, I guess I'll just finish with this. I also got to sit in the room with about 35 other people, some of whom were clients, some of whom were other industry. Todd Duncan sat a couple of rows behind me. Clayton Collins, the president of Housing Wire, sat a couple of rows over and to the left. I mean, there were just some really great people in the room to network with. And the point I would make there was, even as I looked at the folks that were like me, the audience for these presenters, to just make sure that they were not speaking straight into the camera, there was a strong sense in that room altogether of, this is our time in this season to go help a wave of people. And so whatever you have to do, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, get ready. Because if you're not ready for this, you'll look back and probably have some sense of regret. So that was also the temperament of the room around me, not just presenters from the stage who were facing the camera. That's what I heard from your peers and my peers that were sitting in that room. So I was really grateful to be there, and I'm already looking forward to going back again next year.
Great. Well, good. That wraps up another episode of Building Bigger Lives. We've heard about Modern Real Estate Summit that Michael attended a few weeks ago in Las Vegas. And thanks so much for breaking that down for us. I hope our audience took some great takeaways from this episode. And please find it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks so much for joining us. Please share. Please let us know what you learned from this episode. Thanks again for being here.